Well, hi, we are on chapter 9, the 8th commandment. Don't take anything from anybody. And that is translated to one of the 10 commandments is thou shalt not steal. So let's define stealing. So stealing is to take something for nothing. And to take it basically means you're gaining something that was somebody else's that doesn't belong to you, and you took it from them. You took it at their expense. So we think about stealing. It's a consumerism mentality, living off of someone else, taking something you benefit from something someone else had or is or was a possession of, because we can steal more than just stuff. We can steal a lot of different things, and we're going to talk about that, especially with Joseph. I'm going to introduce you to my concept of how we steal things that's not necessarily physical. So what does it mean to steal? Okay, we've kind of talked about that. But really, stealing is a lack of faith that God will provide for one's needs. It's, I'm going to take it into my own hands. I'm going to do it my way because God's not supplying the needs that I have, that I think are needs. Usually they're wants. But it's also interesting because when you steal from somebody, there's a propensity that someone would come back and steal from you. So there's often a double-edged sword. If you steal, then you're going to be very paranoid about someone else stealing from you. It goes back to this greed and hoarding, which is a lack of contentment. And we lack what we have. We lack the gratitude of what we have, what we've been given, what we possess, what God has allowed us to possess. But we also lack the faith that God will provide what we need. And we also lack confidence in God's timing. If God doesn't do it in the time I want, then I'll just take it because God's being slow. Stealing is a lack of love and compassion for the person you are stealing from. And it goes back to the heart of the issue. So 1 Timothy 6:10 talks about the dangers of that attitude. It's for the love of money is the root of all evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. And what Timothy is basically saying, it's that eager for money, it's that wanting what doesn't always belong to you, and that love, that want of money. It's not the money itself, but the want, the love of things. Love is something that you don't have, makes you greedy, and you focus on the materialistic side of what you don't have, not the spiritual side of what you do have. It's kind of interesting because if you think about it, one of the first sins in the Bible was stealing. Eve took something that she shouldn't have taken, and it was the apple. And when you start stealing, the next thing that ends up happening is you lie about what you stole. And that's exactly kind of how this whole scenario worked out. When Eve took the apple that she shouldn't have, it was not hers to have. And then it became a lying, and we're going to talk about lying, false witness and lying next session. But that first thing that Eve did was to take something that didn't belong to her. And we often want something that someone else has. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit because we focus on not what we have, but what someone else has, and I want it. So Proverbs 37-9 talks more about the faith of God will provide. And in this the proverb says, 2 things I ask of you. Do not refuse me before I die. Keep deception and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food that is my portion, that I may not be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Or I may be in want and steal and profane the name of my God. So by reading that backwards, I'm profaning God when I steal from other people. And that goes back to, what's your idol? What is your idol? Is it possessions? Is it stuff? Is it things? If that's your idol, you will steal to satisfy that idol. If in your heart you have to feel good about yourself, that becomes your idol, is what you have. You will steal to get more, to try to satisfy that craving, that deep need that you have that only God will supply, but you think by having things. So what happens when we're convicted that we have stolen? I remember as a kid, I don't know when it was and I don't know how it went down, but I took a sucker from somewhere. And we didn't go to town much, and we definitely didn't have much for stores. But I took a sucker. And of course, I had to go pay for it and apologize and all that. And there's that repentance as a child when you get caught doing something that's interesting and never leaves you. When you have to go back to somebody, and especially an adult like a storekeeper, and admit that you stole something, and you have to give them your 5 pennies, even though your mom, the guy goes, "Oh, it's okay." No, mother says, "No. She has to deal with that." So in Luke 19, Zacchaeus kind of had that come to Jesus moment, literally come to Jesus moment. And after he had encountered Jesus, his guilt for having stolen from his own people, he represented the government, and he took from his own people, patted his pockets. Zacchaeus said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I will give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." When we look at who Jesus is and let him change us, our reaction is repentance, and our reaction is retribution in many times. And Zacchaeus was moved by Jesus, and moved enough to say, "I've been stealing from people, and I'm going to make it right." We can't always do that, to go back and to make things right like Zacchaeus, but we can see how that a true meeting with Jesus changes the heart to where it's not about what I want. It's not about what I think is important as far as money and possessions, because that's quite a bit. That is a lot. If he says he's going to give half his possessions to the poor, I'm not really sure I want to do that some days. I won't make any days. That's given a lot of my instruments away. If I was given half my possessions, that's a lot. That's quite a statement. But when you're changed by Jesus and you realize what you have done, the response to an encounter with Jesus changes you. So the idols of materialism, he talks about in Matthew 6:19. "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal." And it's that whole, where's your focus? Where are your treasures? If your treasures are on earth, there's going to be 2 things that are going to happen. They can rot and corrode and disappear, or somebody can come take them. If our treasure is in heaven, it's not a treasure that has the ability to disappear, to rot, to decay, because it's on a different realm. We are so visual in our culture. We have insurance policies to protect all the things we have in case something happens to them. We get so tight-fingered around the things we own that we're so afraid someone's gonna. We have alarm systems, we have Ring cameras, we have all this stuff so we can protect what we own because it's so important to us. I'm not saying we shouldn't be good stewards, but I'm saying that is a grip on our heart, and that's the idol of materialism. When that is what our focus is protecting what we have so that nobody else can steal it, rather than spending our time investing in spiritual things that really do matter. So what does stealing do to the concept of love your neighbor as yourself? Okay, I know it destroys it, but what does it really do? If I love my neighbor as myself, and my neighbor needs my snow shovel, let him have my snow shovel. I have no clue how many instruments I have given away. Ukuleles all over the place, violins, some mandos, some fiddles, some guitars. While I love to do it, but I also don't hold them tightly. As long as I have one to play, I'll be fine. I mean, I prefer my seagull, but I will play anything. I mean, if I love my neighbor and my neighbor needs that kind of a thing, then that's what my neighbor can have of mine, because it's really not mine. Everything in the concept of things, if they're God's and we're stewards of them, let God worry about if he's going to steal them or not. Many years ago, back in the 70s, I went to Jamaica, and I had a beautiful black Fender electric guitar. I love that guitar. It was an amazing guitar. And over there, they play guitar in their worship. They're out in the middle of nowhere, and they have amps, and they have generators or some power. And that's all they have for music. They don't have anything else, no pianos or organs or anything. We would take the accordion, and I'd have my trumpet in Lois, and I would play, and there'd be 300 people coming. We'd have church. Well, the missionary I was with said, "I think you need to leave your Fender here because they didn't have a guitar." I said, No, that's mine. And I came back to the States with it, and about 4 months later, I took it over to the missionary's house and said, next time you go, take it. They needed it more than I needed it, but I had to work through the mine concept. This was mine. So we talk about stealing things. We talk about our possessions, and rightly so. We should treasure them, use them, share them, give them, not be bound by them. But that's not the only thing we steal. So Joseph's childhood, Joseph's life, we read about him in, we start in Genesis 35, and we find out that Rachel died, and then Jacob has his 12 sons, and then in 37, Joseph was 17, and he's feeding the flock with his brothers, and Joseph was a daddy's boy, and rightly so, him and Benjamin, because he loved their mother. And so there was there was a lot of ill feelings between the older brothers. And in verse 3, it just says that Israel loved Joseph more than the children because he was the son of his old age. It doesn't say he was with his best woman, but it basically is. So Joseph probably didn't have the best, I'm not sure what choice to tell everything to the brothers, but you know teenage boys, that's kind of how they talk and how they live. And so he kind of got himself into a situation where he wasn't well liked by the siblings, and they chose, when he came out to see them, to steal from him. Now they stole his coat, yes, but they stole a lot of other things. They stole his childhood. They stole a relationship with his father. They stole a relationship with his brother. They stole his freedom. They stole his opportunities to be a part of the family. They stole a lot. And the bigger thing we want to see is, how did Joseph respond to stealing? And when push come to shove in the later chapters, and his brothers were all in there, he looked at it differently than this is what you took from me. You stole all these things from me. You stole my relationship with my father, my brother. I lost all these years, and that isn't even talking about prison and all the other things that happened. But he saw that God used it for good. And he didn't hold it against his brothers for them stealing so much mentally from him. And we have a culture that mental health issues are huge, and people hold on to all the things other people have done to them. Joseph could have done that. He could have blamed the rest of his life. Everything that he ever had happen to him was because of his childhood. Because of his brothers. He could have blamed it on everybody else, but he chose to give God a chance to redeem it. And the mental health crisis in our culture, the angry people in our hospitals, that if they would release anger, a lot of their physical illnesses would disappear. When people steal things from us in an emotional, mental, spiritual even, we have to change how we look at it, because if we let God use it for good like Joseph saw, it'll change the way we look at what people take from us. They can take our joy, they can take our peace, our purity, our future. But if we trust God, we can change our perspective on what people are stealing, because it's stuff that people steal. But even if it's our emotions, our peace, our purity, things like that, if we trust God, like Joseph did. I've never been in prison, and I've never been wrongly accused and thrown in prison. I mean, you think of the ways that he had to live for years. He learned a lot because he had a lot of time to let God work on him. Unfortunately, a lot of times we steal from people without thinking it's stealing. We are late, and we just let everybody wait for us. Okay, that's stealing their time. That's stealing respect. We steal their emotions. We play with people mentally. We tell people, oh yes, I want to do this, and we make promises, and then we go back on our promises, and so we steal, in some ways, the integrity that other people thought we had. And now they're disappointed because they thought, so there's a lot of ways. I think the biggest thing is let God restore what's been taken. What is the motive for taking from somebody? What is the reason? Why is that person doing what they're doing. Read a book on my second trip to Africa a couple years ago that the Africans and their money. And one of the things it talked about is this man gave a man a shirt, an African a shirt. And they don't have a social security system over there. They are very much community oriented. They take care of each other. And if you have something and you're not using it, they come and take it because they need it. It's not stealing, it's being a community. And he noticed that this man that he gave this special shirt to never wore the shirt. Everybody else in the family wore the shirt. So one day he said to him, "Didn't you like the shirt I gave you?" Man said, "Oh, I love the shirt you gave me." And he said, "Well, I never see you wearing it." And he said, "Oh, well, the first one up in the morning gets a choice of the clothes." So sometimes the way we look at things is very misleading. We want to give somebody something and they always have to keep it. It's special, it's precious. Now we have to give with loose fingers, that if they can't use it, someone else can. But we give and expect people to put it on the shelf in their pantry or in their china closet and just look at it all the time, be reminded of us. And if people can't use something, giving with open hands to allow them to bless somebody else, we sometimes have to change our expectations of how we feel when people may not appreciate what we have and they regift it. So what lessons can we learn from the beauty of living without tightening our fingers and holding a grip on something so tight? Not only it's not our possessions, it's God's. But when we serve other people, we're serving God, we're not serving them. Our perspective on how we see things is so different. So do we protect our hearts from being the object stolen as much as a treasury? Think about that one. So we protect everything so that it gets stolen, but do we protect our hearts? Do we make sure that we spiritually are in a place that is good so people, other people aren't responsible for my joy so they can steal it, or my peace? It's between God and I to have that peace and that joy. Somebody else can't necessarily steal your joy or your peace. So sometimes we have to change our perspective. We need to look at our idols and say, is it an idol of want, an idol of greed, that then I become very possessive and I'm worried about people stealing from me? Or do I have the mantra that what's mine is yours if you need it? So when we just kind of look back, truth is God's ultimate character. And there was a lot of people in the Bible that lied and or stole. And it's really interesting to take a look at the people that stole and look at the bigger picture. Where are they coming from? How did this come about? Why did they steal? For Zacchaeus, it was a way of life. It was his job. But he added a little bit to it. For the brothers, they stole because they were jealous and angry. Why do we steal? Well, we don't trust God enough to provide for spiritual, emotional, mental, physical. And sometimes we really focus on the physical and we don't look at the other ways we steal from the people around us and steal from God, because if we're not giving God the best we have, then technically we're stealing from God, because we're not living up to the potential that God set us up to be. So some interesting thoughts. Consumerism, taking something that doesn't belong to you, but also how do we handle being stolen from, and what do we consider our possessions, and what do we just look at as, everything I have is God's, and my fingers are loose, my needs are met, and it'll be okay. So the character of God, that God will provide for everything we need, is one of God's characters. And he's always with us. We don't need a lot of other things. And we need our daily bread therewith to be content. And when you go back to the children of Israel when they were in the desert, the manna that they took too much of, in essence, we're hoarding it, greeting it, turned to maggots the next day. So as we just think about that, do we have maggots growing in our closets because we've taken more than we need and we're hoarding it? Just some thoughts.